Do you know the difference between a therapy group and a support group? Let's actually talk about it. So, I want to make sure that you stay into the end because in this video, I'm actually going to give you two real examples of how I ran a therapy group compared to a support group so that you can truly see the difference. So, let's start with definitions. When we think about a talk therapy group versus a support group, a lot of people lump them together as though they are the same. And so, let's talk about the key differences. So, when you think about a therapy group, it is for mental health treatment, just like individual therapy, but more in a group setting, typically 6 people, 7 people, I would say max 8 different people. And so at the end of the day, the therapy group is still solving a particular problem. Now, in these groups, you will often see that people are clearly linking their presenting problem to a mental health condition like depression, anxiety. We may be focused on symptom reduction. We may be also focused on them building up a skill set or changing a behavior. So some core examples would look like a anger management group, a emotional regulation group, an anxiety group, or a depression group. So the way that these groups are structured, therapy groups are typically either curriculum based and or they are process based. Now, I am going to add a third one, which is a hybrid model, which means that maybe in the hour, you will do some teaching and then you will do reflection with some processing, which is also known as a open discussion. So what these structures mean is that you can teach. You can allow those who can process their experiences in the room, and you can also make sure that every single participant is able to implement what you just taught of what they learned, because we all know that the real treatment actually happens when they leave the therapy room. So let's look at this in a real life example. One of the groups that I have ran are for teenagers, and it was following the evidence-based practice of aggression replacement training for teenagers. And so in this group, we did do a thorough intake process. We wanted to make sure that everybody was a good fit for the group. But beyond the logistics and the structure, what we taught in the group was to help them identify triggers before they have an anger outburst. We taught them specific coping skills so that when they identify that they were about to have an anger outburst or they were in the midst of one, they will be able to use the coping skills we taught to calm down. Now, in the group, what we did is we practiced how to use those coping skills because, for example, somebody may say deep breathing doesn't work, but really what they are doing is hyperventilating like this, not actually breathing in through their nose, holding it for like 3 to 5 seconds, if not more, and then blowing it out through their nose slowly. So believe it or not, people need to learn how to do the coping skill. We never want to anticipate that they know how to do it when they leave. So we do some role plays. We also process past anger outbursts. So we talk about what were the triggers that led you to have that anger outburst. And then we also, of course, are preventative. So we want to talk about what are some situations that might come up in the future that will trigger an anger outburst, and let's talk about how you're going to handle it. So when you look at the full structure that I just described, this is treatment, this is skill development, this is also behavior change. So when you pull all of that together, now we are looking at the clinical components of therapy groups. So when you are running a therapy group, it is ran by a licensed mental health provider with different titles based on the state that the person is licensed in, or it is ran by a supervisee under the supervision of a licensed provider. Now, often there is a mental health diagnosis linked to the individuals that are in the group, which then tackles the big problem that everybody will be working on in the group. And especially if insurance is involved, there has to be a mental health diagnosis present. Otherwise, the insurance will not cover it and the person will have to pay out of pocket. Therefore, a diagnosis is not a requirement for people to come into your group, but it is common. Now, also, the logistics of running a therapy group include clinical documentation such as the intake, treatment goals for the group, which is usually one uniform goal. Then you write your standard progress note. And then, of course, you have the curriculum and the wrap up of the expectations for the group. Now let's switch over to what is a support group. So let me be clear. A support group is not mental health treatment. So a support group is designed to provide emotional support. Its goal is to create connection with the members that are in it because some people feel like they are alone. It does reduce isolation. It also will give people the ability to normalize their experience. So when you think about a support group, it is really focused on a shared space, shared experiences, building a community, and validation that you are not going through this alone. They are not designed to diagnose, to treat, or to clinically intervene. So, what does the structure of a support group look like? Well, it can be discussion based, it can be semi structured, or it can be loosely structured. You may have a theme per week, you may have conversation prompts, but they do not have a treatment plan, clinical interventions, skill mastery requirements, and they may not even have designated progress notes. It does not mean that you cannot write a summary about what happened, but these individuals do not have charts. So who can run a support group? Support groups, they can be facilitated by a mixture of different people because by far this is the one main question that I get when I talk about therapy groups, not support groups. So support groups, they can be facilitated by mental health providers, non-therapists, community leaders, peer facilitators. Now, the role of you being a facilitator is to hold a space for those individuals to talk and to build a community. You guide a conversation by a prompt. You, yes, maintain safety. You should still talk about confidentiality, and you do set boundaries regarding basic rules of when the group starts, when it ends. Is it a open or closed group, meaning everybody starts together as a cohort versus people can just roll in and then graduate out? You still want to set the structure, but you are not providing clinical intervention, verbiage like it sounds like therapy. You are not doing therapy. So I want to share with you an example of a support group that I facilitated as a contractor of a nonprofit that was serving moms. Okay. So they were moms in the postpartum period. Now, part of the application process for me to even be a facilitator is that I was actually a mom of a 6-month-old. I was going through my own postpartum journey. It did help that I was a mental health provider, but when I did my interview, they needed to explain to me in very clear language what is and is not supposed to happen when we're talking about therapy versus a support group. So, the structure, it was part of a nonprofit. It included therapists and non-therapist facilitators. The requirement they had was that it had to be a mom. You didn't have to be in postpartum, but a mother. And it was for women who had given birth to children within the last 12 to 18 months. So they were very particular in terms of the audience, okay? So the purpose of this support group was that the goal was not treatment. The goal was to give women the following: a space to talk about identity shifts, switching from maybe being single to having their first child. For me, it was not just my first child, but also being in a geriatric pregnancy, running a business after I had my son. There are so many shifts that happen when you become a mom or a mom again that some women are really suffering through silence with. We also provided support around being a mom again for those who were having more than one child. And then also, we opened up conversations, not therapy treatment language, around day to day stressors. Every week did have a theme. So, one week we may talk about time management. Another week we may talk about self care in terms of taking care of your health, your body, washing your hair, taking a long shower, not what I call a mom shower. We also talked about conversations around mom guilt, defined what it is, and then have a conversation about what triggers it. We literally defined a space for these women to reframe guilt from becoming a mom and then also taking care of themselves. So, what the support group did not include is very key when you compare it to a therapy group. There was no diagnoses, there is no treatment plan, there is no progress note. However, we did have a full intake process to make sure that the woman was a good fit for what the group was built for. We did build group norms on the first session and expectations of how we want the women to feel safe, to converse with one another, and of course, confidentiality. We also talked to them about creating a space to actually be present so that they can actually openly share how they really feel, such as having a sacred space, headphones on, especially if their baby is asleep. It happens, okay? So, one of the other things that we did at the end of each support group is that they received around the 45-minute mark a questionnaire in the Zoom chat box. They opened it up and we gave them about 5 minutes or up to 5 minutes to complete a feedback form. The goal was to make sure that they were feeling supported based on the goals of the reason why the support group was developed to begin with. Then what we did is we reviewed the feedback after the people who created the structure of the group and then hired me in, reviewed it. They gave me a summary, and then I used that to then infuse it into the next group's topics. Okay. So we adjusted the topics. We may have stayed with one topic during the following week to go deeper, and we brought it back to the group because some topics they needed more than others, so we can make proper adjustments. So, one important outcome for support groups, something really important to note is that some women realize through the example that I gave you that they actually needed more support. They wanted individual therapy. Truth be told, because I am a provider, I did not talk to them about therapy, but I did answer questions around how to make proper referrals, not me, that they can then see someone for individual therapy. So, in a way, the support group created the space to decrease the stigma, maybe, of going to therapy or maybe highlighting certain areas that needed to be talked through, and they don't have to do it in a group space. So, it primed them for individual therapy. It also helped me provide them with referrals so that it could be more accessible. It also taught the individuals who put together this nonprofit to create a resource guide for now women coming into these groups for them to be able to have resources in their particular areas because they were not all in the same state. That's also a perk of having a support group versus a therapy group. As a therapist, I have to be licensed in the state that they reside in order to treat them. But for a support group, you don't have to have that. They can be nationwide. But we did end up putting together over time a resource guide, and that was really helpful for the women. So the simple way that I could sum this up and explain the difference is that the therapy groups treat, a support group supports. Both are very valuable. They just serve very different purposes. Now, let's talk about why distinction matters, especially if you are a provider. So, one is ethics. When you look at mental health services, it has an ethical code that you are to follow. Also, you have to look at what is your scope of practice. So, one of the questions that I get typically from non-licensed providers, but maybe they're going to school, maybe they're under supervision, maybe they just stopped at the master's degree, but they want to create something. It is not called therapy, it's called support groups. But because you maybe went to school and you've learned the language, the lingo of mental health, you want to be really careful that the individuals who are coming into your support group that they're actually stepping foot in a support group and they don't mix it up with believing that you are now their therapist. So you want to think about how do you market the group, the language that you use to draw people in. You also want to talk to the participants about realistically what to expect in terms of the outcome of the support. Is it an 8-week support group? Is it an ongoing support group? So this clarity does protect you as the facilitator of the groups. It clearly protects the participants, the clients, and if you run a practice or a business, it also protects your entity. So if you are a mental health provider and you now realize, you know what, I actually want to stay in my lane and I want to actually put together a therapy group. This is a great way I can pay it forward. I can serve more people. I can still do what I know for individual therapy, but I can choose one problem to solve with a group of people. And I can also leverage my time. Then I would highly recommend that you check out the description box and that you get our therapy starter kit checklist for groups. It takes you through also additional intake questions and logistics on the back end office portion of your practice so that you can make sure that you're set up to accept therapy groups. So I would love to hear from you. Go ahead to the comment box and I want you to tell me if you have been considering a therapy or support group, which one are you leaning more toward and what type of group, meaning who do you want to serve? So now that we've wrapped up the distinction between therapy groups and support groups, if you are leaning more toward, you know what, I really want to tap into doing therapy groups. I want to be able to extend the services that I already offer individually, but I really want to leverage my time. I want to make more money per hour with also making a bigger impact and serving the people that I want to serve. I want you to watch this video next.